said. I mean, the truth is that I recommend the S&P 500 to people, and I happen to believe that Berkshire is about as sound as any single investment can be in terms of earning reasonable returns over time. But I would not want to bet my life on whether we beat the S&P 500 over the next 10 years. I think I obviously think there's a reasonable chance of doing it, and we've had periods, I don't know how many out of the 50, 55 years we've been doing it, or I don't know how many we've beaten or not. I mentioned earlier that 1954 was my best year, but I was working absolutely with peanuts, unfortunately. And I think if you work with small sums of money, I think there is some chance of a few people that really do bring something to the game. But I think it's very, very hard for anybody to identify them. And I think that when they work with large funds, it gets tougher. And it's certainly gotten tougher for us with larger funds. And I would make no promise to anybody that we will do better than the S&P 500. But what I will promise them is that I've got 99% of my money in Berkshire, and most members of my family may not be quite that extreme, but they're close to it. And I do care about what happens to Berkshire over the long period, about as much as anybody could care about it. But caring doesn't guarantee results. It does guarantee attention. But, Greg?
Well, I would agree, Warren, that there's never guarantees, but when I look at the assets we have in place and the teams that are in place, i.e., you're committed to Berkshire, but we have dedicated teams that equally are dedicated to Berkshire, and they're sure going to give it their best effort every day. And when I look at the assets and the people, I think we have, as you said, you can't guarantee it, but we have a great chance of sure giving a good effort to outperform it.
It's hard to imagine getting a terrible result with Berkshire, but anything can happen. And what I do know is it would be easier to be running $5 million than our book net worth at Berkshire at the quarter end, I think, was 370 some billion, which is down, but it's still greater than the book net worth of any corporation in the United States. It's probably, maybe there's some federal corporation that has more, but in terms of it may be the greatest in the world. I'm not sure.
When I would
and
add,
that makes life difficult in some ways too.
Right, and the potential of our operating businesses are substantial. When you think, we've talked about energy, you touched on it, that infrastructure is continuing to change. We're ready for $100 billion of investment opportunities there. If we just look at the business over the next 10 years and the infrastructure that's required and how it's changing, substantial investments there, that just tell me we have very good prospects. And we're well positioned to pursue them. Which again, to me, when you look at our core businesses, you touched on them, Burlington, the insurance and energy. It's tough. Our downside is very nicely protected. We have three really core great businesses.
Yeah, and we're better positioned than anybody in the energy business. Just because we don't have dividend requirements, we retain $28 billion of earnings over 20 years. That you can't do it if you run a normal public company. And we've got a huge appetite, and the country needs it. The world needs it, and we are a very, very logical, well-structured, well-managed, I would say, because it doesn't involve me, company to participate in just huge requirements around the world. Now, they're slow and they involve governments and state governments, and there's a lot of. It's not anything that happens dramatically. It will happen, and Berkshire should participate in a huge way. We can do things in insurance nobody else can do. That doesn't mean much many times, but occasionally it may be important. So there are there are some advantages to size and strength, but there are disadvantages to size too. If we find some great opportunity that for $1 billion to double our money, that's $1 billion pre-tax, and that's $790 million after tax, and on a market value of $450 billion or whatever it may be, it doesn't amount to much, unfortunately.